morning, afternoon, evening, whichever part of the world you are dialing in from. A very warm welcome to all of you to the Lemnisk Customer Data Platform Virtual Summit 2023. I'm Subra Krishnan, co-founder and CEO of Lemnisk. A quick introduction to Lemnisk before we get started. Lemnisk helps enterprise marketing leaders supercharge their marketing ROI by providing them with a real-time view into each of their individual customers and allowing them to tailor one-to-one experiences. Lemnisk is recognized for its world-class customer data platform-driven real-time personalization and marketing automation capabilities. We do this while ensuring the highest standards of information security and data privacy. Large enterprises with complex marketing technology ecosystems, including, let's say, an Adobe or a Salesforce Marketing Cloud or an MSG 365, have consistently leveraged Lemnisk to drive better outcomes. So with that quick introduction, let's sort of set the ball rolling. We actually conduct this summit across multiple markets each year. In fact, as we speak, we just finished an in-person summit in Mumbai earlier in the month. Why do we do this? So I think in the rapidly evolving CDP space, Lemnisk's virtual summits and half-day in-person conferences have sort of become like a flagship must-attend kind of event for marketing and digital transformation leaders to really cut through the clutter and develop an insightful and framework-led approach to capitalizing on customer data. All of us that are in this call today are connected by a common desire and curiosity to really understand our customers better and help them get the best possible experience. And there is no better technology in the market today than customer data platforms or CDPs. But as it often happens with new and exciting innovations, the CDP space too is sometimes rife with confusion, opportunistic pivots, and you could say appropriation of marketing messages as multiple companies really try to reposition themselves as a CDP. And it is in this environment that Lemnisk and our summits in the past few years have brought industry leaders together and sort of just helped clear the fog a bit. So today's summit promises to do the same. As always, we have a really stellar and exciting panel of speakers lined up. First up, we'll have Jason Scott, SVP and Director of Marketing Technology and Operations at First Horizon Bank. He will deliver our keynote this morning. Let us all leverage Jason's deep marketing expertise as he talks to us about how to go about implementing CDP from ideation through launch and measurement. Next, we will have the ever insightful David Raab, founder of the CDP Institute, join us. David and I keep doing this annual crystal gazing, if we can call it that, into the CDP space. And David, as we know, is the Nostradamus of this space and really try to understand how it's evolving. And finally, we'll round up the evening with Declan, Lemnisk's SVP Sales and BD for North America, moderating a panel with Randy Salzman, Director of Brand Marketing, ABNB Federal Credit Union, and Kareem Masri, Head of Digital and Data Solutions, Vibrant Tech, on how to really craft a data strategy for effective marketing outcomes. So there you have it. We are ready for liftoff. We will stay on time. We are going to just move through session from session, each one lasting approximately 30 to 40 minutes. So don't go anywhere. It'll all be sequenced one after the other, and we should wind up in time this morning. So thank you all and look forward to an insightful and sort of fun-filled, learning-filled event. Let's commence the event, as I said, with a keynote by Jason. So just to reintroduce Jason again, Jason is SVP, Director of Brand Marketing Technology and Operations at First Horizon Bank. Jason is a strategic marketing technology leader in financial services with 20 plus years of shaping and connecting customers and user experiences using a variety of technology stacks. His current focus is on advancing a connected customer ecosystem to include CRM, which is both sales and service CRMs, CDP strategy for both B2B and B2C, marketing automation, personalization, and related orchestration components. He has defined and socialized the MarTech vision and roadmap for the organization and designed, staffed the MarTech and Ops function from the ground up. Jason, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and it's the stage is all yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So, as Supra mentioned, I lead marketing, technology, and operations for First Horizon Bank, which is really three pillars. It's our marketing data platforms, our CRM strategy and delivery, and our marketing automation capabilities. So, I think organizationally and structurally, everybody approaches it differently, but that's afforded us the ability with that layout to be pretty nimble and with our investments and capabilities like CDPs, and really gives us a lot of autonomy within the organization in the right way with driving personalized experiences at scale. We've been in our CDP evolution, as I'll call it, for the last 12 to 18 months. And I'll say that when we started the evolution, we had this large program scale consensus building effort underway, brought internal stakeholders together across the organization, and really looked to evangelize and to shape the effort. After about 4 months of that, it became pretty clear that we needed to drive focus on delivery and implementation and realizing the value in our investment. So we really moved after the first 4 months. We really moved into selecting a handful of use cases and pushing forward and making it more about marketing and CX than a true enterprise level implementation in the first phase. So once we scaled that down and stopped with the consensus building, we were able to get our first use cases off the ground within 4 months. So I'll move to, as you can see, to our brand highlights. This is important to set context. So First Horizon Bank is headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. We've been around for 150 years. And as you can see with some of the highlights of our brand, a lot around high touch, human-based relationships, care, and so those are very important factors for the investment in capabilities like customer data platforms that can drive personalized experiences, and that's digital and human. So I'll move on to the next slide and begin to set the stage before we get into the CDP discussion. Can everybody see? Let me make sure I'm on the right slide here. Okay, we should be on the differentiation through customer experience slide. Can everybody see that? So around the wheel and central to the investment in our CDP and the evolution of our CDP strategy is a customer 360 focus. And so starting, again, I mentioned with our brand highlights, the focus on relationships and our ability to capture and cultivate relationships with our prospects and customers. The capture of interactions across channels and how our prospects and customers ultimately behave with our brand. Understanding and applying milestones and life events using data as well across those multiple channels, first party, second party, third party. Understanding behaviors. So we're a bank, so behaviors could be transactional. They could be what we're listening to and detecting across our channels. The products and services that we offer our clients. Banks are effectively commodity-based businesses, but our ability to differentiate and offer the right products and service at the right time that meets the aspirations of our customers is key and important. Ongoing offers based on propensity, based on trying to grow the business through new acquisition. So the constant and traditional program and campaign-based offers that come from marketing. Our sales team and sales organization and our bankers constantly managing a pipeline of opportunities and deals. And then moving more to I'd say the service side of that 360 relationship certainly managing the requests, service requests that come in from our customers across channels, and listening to feedback and complaints, and closing the loop on those feedback, on that feedback and complaints. That's the three-legged stool for us: marketing, sales, and service. Even in I'd say less growth-oriented economic times, I think we've all been accustomed to the pandemic era, as I'll call it. Maybe not so much in the way of new growth and acquisition, but that's why that customer 360 is central and important. Sometimes it's about growth, and other times it's about retention and building trust and loyalty with your customers, and deepening them with the right service at the right time. So a good data foundation, data-driven foundation is central to that and important to that. As we connect personalized experiences, awareness, constant awareness of our brand through a variety of channels, and through our paid media strategy, in our expanding footprint, driving that interaction with our brand, that engagement with our brand to connected experiences that based on the capture of interest and intent. So the establishment of that identity and profile, who's interacting with our brand, what are they interested in, what's the degree of intent. So those are important capture points that give us the ability to trigger further messaging and content and experiences with those prospects and customers. The orchestration side of it, also important: multi-touch, omni-channel, across the board, connected, similar brand experience, consistent. Those are all very important. Those are orchestrated processes, and how we personalize those experiences so that we demonstrate to an individual or to a business that they are unique and special in some way, that we've done the work to understand more about their aspirations. Honoring preference, especially in the digital world, and with some of the what I'll call the younger generations, giving the capability and the wherewithal to capture how customers and prospects prefer to interact with our brand. I think that's central and important. Efficiency, getting scale internally on how we create and shape experiences for prospects and customers at scale, so that it's not a manual, batch-driven push effort each time you want to create an experience for a customer. Measurement, again, connected measurement. What's the transparency you're providing to your stakeholders, your shareholders? How are you measuring marketing performance? How does that ultimately tie into the investment value of a customer data platform? We'll get into that a little bit later. And then finally, optimization, our ability to optimize those experiences because we've got a connected ecosystem. And we can constantly test and learn. I've heard my CMO talk constantly about progress over perfection, and if we're doing everything right, then perhaps we're not optimal. In marketing, I think we all agree that there should be some degree of failure so that we can test and learn. So moving on to the next slide. So now to the customer data platform and how that is the foundational enabler for the context that I just went through. If you start from the left side of this, you can see the customer data platform is central. It's the foundational enabler for connected, real-time, segmented experiences across channels. It's your ecosystem. And so you're at this point, I view the customer data platform as the foundational enabler that's breathing life into your data. It's breathing life into the experiences for your prospects and clients. If you start on the left-hand side, you're working with typically downstream data providers, first party, second party, third party, ultimately that would pipe into your hub and into your foundation so that you can build and activate strategically driven segments. Who do you want to target and for what purpose? And so that's through a combination of resolving identities. It's what you're modeling from an ML AI perspective. So starting from the left side and moving around the infinity wheel, as I mentioned, customer data platform, central and foundational to your marketing and CX capabilities to enabling personalized experiences. So we're defining who we're targeting. We're creating experiences through content, through messaging, through the different platforms that are either human-based or digital-based. All of that's flowing through a CDP as cornerstone. We're defining how we want to orchestrate those experiences, moving down to the bottom right of the loop. And so there's a targeted strategy or a strategy for how you're targeting those segments across your different channels. As you can see to the right side with the bullets, I won't drain it or insult anybody. It's the web, it's the email, and so on. What are the channels that you're trying to target your segments for to deliver those experiences? If you happen to have a CRM capability, that's pretty centric for larger sales organizations that cultivate those relationships, aggregate 360-degree views, and so there's a ton around sales enablement, lead generation that you're constantly piping in, and then we're equipping our sales teams with the ability to convert and retain, all of which bridges to a customer data platform strategy, and ultimately you're resolving existing identities for existing customers that you can use to drive for cross-sell and deep relationship deepening purposes. As we convert and retain, we're certainly working with sales tools and events and augmenting the banker and sales organization capabilities, in our case with individual products, and we're doing a little bit around one-to-one marketing and creating those experiences on a one-to-one scale. Finally, moving to the bottom left and getting into your measurement and optimization, as I mentioned on the last slide. Some key considerations for CDP selection. The disclaimer here is that each organization is going to approach this differently. So I'm not representing that we have all the answers for CDP selection, but I'll hit on some of the points that we considered as we went through the evolution, and as we have continue to go through the evolution. So besides the financial investment, there's an overarching assessment of fit with your risk and your data governance profile, your overall architecture, your ecosystem, and then to get specific about evaluation criteria. Looking at a CDP strategy means evaluating the products, the tools, the capabilities that are out there according to its connector ecosystem, its API capabilities, available connectors. So for us, that was inbound and outbound. So what does the connector ecosystem look like to pipe data in from our first-party data sources? What was available that we could pipe in to resolve identities from third-party sources, and then certainly from an outbound perspective, and key and very important is the activation side. So as you're shaping these segments, how robust is the connector ecosystem to be able to push and distribute your content and messaging across channels, and that includes paid and advertising. Security and encryption, table stakes, very important in the evaluation process. And so according to your organizational policies, outside of the traditional data transport and securing the data at rest, making sure that as you evaluate, there's a good fit and profile assessment for that. Resolving to identity key, we've seen this on our side evolve as we got off the ground with those initial use cases. We had to make some quick decisions, so we decided to go with our proprietary key that comes in from our internal first-party data-driven identification process, customer prospect. But there are different ways to do this, and it'll depend on your strategy and approach. I've seen some thoughts around identity resolution providers perhaps being a good resource, so external channel-based might be an option there. Within the tool itself, your ability to create and activate segments dynamically. So the traditional world of building lists and defining segments, shaping segments has required a lot of data overhead from data workers that are maybe writing SQL queries and so on, and it's more manual and batch driven. So these tools, good tools, should give you the ability to do more of the declarative, visual drag and drop, pulling from your defined data model. Should have a sound cadence for publish frequency, and should be pretty, I would say, robust in terms of viewing and validating the segments themselves that you're generating. On the data model side, new entities and attributes, as your data needs continue to change according to the strategic objectives of the programs and campaigns, making sure that the platform and the capabilities afford and allow for those types of changes without having to go back and do a significant rework. Interfacing to CRM, if you have a CRM platform or strategy, and other customer-driven data sources, piping into your central data model, and then consideration for industry-based frameworks. We're banking and financial services, so there are good frameworks and models that can be applied that you can leverage to build your data models. But if you're in healthcare, other industries also might be a consideration. On the change data capture side, this is something that's evolved for us as we've moved forward with CDP, understanding the ability to capture change as it's coming in from the various downstream sources and into the CDP, changes to the identity itself, additional data attribute capture. The CDP itself, the ability to trigger those near real-time experiences based on that change and the capture of that change. And then finally, formulas and attributes. So assessing the capabilities of the CDP for large data set processing. So if you're I'll use an example in the banking world, the work to capture a single product household. If you put a dynamic formula into your model, you've got to run the calculation against a large data set. So making sure that you've got the processing capacity and capability for that, and finally you can test and validate it accordingly. Moving to adopting a CDP strategy. So for us, I mentioned the general consensus building effort in the very beginning. I think we lost sight of the original purpose, which was that the CDP and the investment in it for us was a marketing and CX enabler. It's not trying to solve for master data management strategy, enterprise data management, and it wasn't a technology first or focused effort. It was simply about needing to have that connected hub, foundational hub, right in the middle that can do near real-time activation of those personalized experiences. So having those key business objectives and outcomes oriented in that manner, business objectives first, justifying the investment is important. I'd say you have to have key evangelists in your organization that can get these concepts across and sell them out in the right way, frankly. There's the traditional pushback that enterprise data warehouses and some of those capabilities do the same thing, and I do not believe that's the case at all. Those are traditional structured data approaches, but they're not breathing life into your experiences. And they're not doing it in dynamic manners. They're not evolving and stitching identities together easily or at scale. And so I think the ability to establish those differences with your internal stakeholders, especially those that have to sign off on the checks, that's really important. I'll say selecting a strong implementation partner is key. There isn't a whole lot, at least when we started, and I believe this is still the case, there isn't a ton of industry expertise available when it comes to implementing a customer data platform. So I would say select a strong implementation partner. There wasn't a reference guide or a manual available that we could follow as we went through this. Quick winnable use cases out of the gate. Don't select your most complicated, orchestrated, personalized experiences as your first use cases. Start with something that's smaller in scale that you can win with. For us, it was an existing onboarding journey that we were already executing, and we replumbed it from the CDP, and so that gave us a pretty solid way to actually test and validate, which is in the next box. Framework for testing and delivery. Have the ability to test and deliver at the individual points of the process, and then full integrated end-to-end testing from data all the way to distribution. Very important. And then finally, ensure that you've got the wherewithal and a foundation for measurement and insights so that you can easily and transparently communicate the value of the experiences that you're shaping and creating and driving through a customer data platform. The next slide talks to bridging artificial intelligence, machine learning with CDP, and I'll just be honest with you all. This is something that we're very early on with. So I'll give you some thoughts, and I'm sure there are others on the panel and in the group here that can take this conversation further. So I'll just say illustratively, they can be. The marriage of CDPs and AI, ML can be powerful as an enabler, and generative AI, which is a huge emerging topic that we as an organization are still trying to formulate a position for, that could take things to the next level. So we'll take a customer, Mrs. Jones, and so a lot of the modeling and AI capture and capability can shape Mrs. Jones and ultimately what her experience looks like through models and using data to train. So we know for propensity, for example, that we can identify that Mrs. Jones is a great candidate for next best product or action. But we know that she's also showing and demonstrating signals that she might close her accounts and possibly close her relationship and leave. So that's an important point. The models are telling us that. We know through her interactions with channels that she prefers a human touch, and she dislikes salesy, and that she is really responsive to a formal communication style. And then she's a frequent complainer. She's in with the contact center or in one of the stores, and has frequent needs, and there's a pretty strong feedback requirement there. On the CDP side, from a data capture, her identity as Mrs. Jones and continuing to evolve with some of the key attributes. This is not exhaustive, it's illustrative, but we know she's a highly tenured customer and very valuable to us. We know her different contact points. We know that she's in the Dallas DMA, and we know that she does not like to be communicated with through text messages, and so all of that combines to an optimal experience where if you were to define that and capture that in a single statement, it's a warm, polite account rep outreach, and perhaps some personalized email and tailored web content. From a generative AI perspective, what would it be like to have Mrs. Jones interact with some content on our website and then instantly receive something that's special, unique, personalized for Mrs. Jones based on her interaction from that website, and we didn't have to go through the traditional marketing program and campaign to push that messaging. So again, I'm interested in learning more from others on the generative AI side, but that's a basic use case for me that could be really powerful and resonate. Measurable values of the CDPs. So mentioned this a couple of times now, but the importance of translating the value of investment in these platforms, and so for us, it's connecting to the funnel certainly. So starting at the top with the impressions and engagement that you're creating with your brand across channels, and eventually the capture of those identities and onboarding those identities in your CDP, so that you have those identities in a way that can continue to evolve. So the capture of the channel-based interactions, they're considering products and services with you. You're able to learn more and more with every interaction and every detected behavior. To the bottom of the funnel and how we're converting eventually with leads and product applications and products and services that are added to the relationship. All of that translates into measurable and attributable value to your customer data platform through increased loyalty. We mentioned the comment about economic times that are less growth oriented. Those loyalty metrics and the ability to retain our customers are also important. And then the obvious return on investment. The bottom line, among many things, is the efficiency that you gain internally in your marketing and CX capabilities with campaign time to market, your operational SLAs, and your data accuracy. So just to use a basic example, in the traditional world of driving a multi-channel campaign, having maybe more than one data worker producing the same segment, there could be some data accuracy issue there. And lack of consistency, and ultimately 5x if you did 5x the work to push those lists across channels and activate content that's oriented to each of those channels and so on. So the scale that you get from a CDP as the hub and foundational enabler is huge and important. I'll just use a basic and quick web and personalization example. This is pushing a one-to-one experience with CDP powering it. Many of you probably already know this, but our ability to capture you're blending data from multiple sources to come to some degree of fit and intent. So fit might tell you that this is an existing customer, and the ML model tells us they show strong propensity for a mortgage product. You're also seeing intent signals coming in from the different channel-based interactions that bolster that interest or that score that you can pipe or gather or associate with that individual identity in your CDP, so that you can trigger a personalized experience, in this case, that orients that high-value customer to a mortgage product, or maybe it's some type of a wealth advisory product in our case. But that's a swap out and a personalized swap out of content that's different from the general public web experience. So this is an example of where CDP is sitting right in the middle of that, based on that fit and intent, and getting a more tailored, personalized message that can be measured. By the way, it's connected to your measurement ecosystem. You can optimize with it because you're swapping out and trying different versions of content and imagery and so on. So yeah, very, very powerful to be able to do that from CDP at scale. And then finally, one more example. I think many of us are already doing orchestrated onboarding journeys, but the quick point that I want to illustrate here is that your CDP and the way you shape your model in your CDP in terms of toggle attributes according to identities that stitch together can represent different points in the journey. And so you can use these toggle attributes to indicate and personalize experiences according to actions and behaviors, transactions that your customers are taking, so that you're not spraying one-size-fits-all messaging to your customers when in fact some of these touch points do not apply. So the CDP is for us is a powerful cornerstone foundation to be able to activate correct experiences for those clients across channels. So in this case, we've got email, outbound calling, and direct mail represented. And that is all from me. Supra or others, what do we want to open this for questions?
Yeah, I mean, if there are folks who have questions, please just post them on the group. We'll try to take as many as possible, but recognizing that we'll have to keep to schedule as well. But thank you, Jason. I think that's a fantastic keynote. I think there's so many big takeaways from there. And for all of you in the audience, we will, of course, share some of this content back as well. Jason, from my side, I had one question. And so firstly, I thought that it's super heartwarming to see that you're giving a very open and honest assessment of how you went about doing this, and admitting where sort of there were shortcomings or where there were limitations. And I think one place that I did want to grill you about, because I think many of the people in this call would be considering CDP as we speak, and specifically going back to your slide, they are likely in the establishing key business objectives kind of space right now. So and you spoke about how it was important to not sort of lose sight of miss the forest for the trees and all of that, and like not think about MDMs and how this could be a data lake and how this can be everyone's panacea to everything, but instead stay really focused on CDP being a foundational hub for marketing data, right? So is it fair to say that some of what you mentioned was shaped by maybe any false starts or any other sort of tough learnings you had? If so, can you talk about it? What are some typical conflicts that emerged as you were trying to get this in place, get the business objectives in place, and how did you sort of clear the fog and arrive at what you actually wanted? That would be fantastic to hear from you.
Sure, sure. I think for us, and everybody's different, but for us, we're still not very mature from an MDM perspective, and we've got, because we're a bank, we've got some inter customer data and where that data is ultimately sourced, maybe on some older technology. And so when I think when you pull together with larger groups, and you have very smart people in the room, everybody wants perfection, right? And everybody wants to have the final enterprise data architecture laid out before you go into the CDP world, right? And so we were willing to pivot from that once we saw stagnation in the effort. We were willing to pivot from that, and remember the focus was that we wanted to quickly shape, or at scale shape, personalized experiences, and get those activated out to our channels in a meaningful way. So and we were willing to accept, because in this case, we're not yet in a journey where we're doing anything with transaction accuracy. We're not processing transactions with this, right? And so we're willing to accept progress over perfection, and that was the mantra. Especially when I mentioned the first few use cases were around what we were already ultimately distributing to our clients. So we knew what the baseline target or target was for final delivery in terms of how the segments needed to be defined and shaped. So that gave us a very important way to reconcile, if you will, and confirm accuracy. So I don't know, that's a long-winded answer, but it really was having the mutual agreement that we wanted to pivot and make it more about marketing than enterprise data management, if I were to summarize.
Got it. No, I think progress over perfection perfectly sums it up, I think, right?
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. I think when we sometimes get caught up in sort of the details and sort of try to get everything right in first shot, but sometimes it's just important to get things going, and that sort of feeds into what Declan seems to be asking in chat as well. Is it, how long did it take for you to sort of get the first use case up and running, get to that point?
Yeah, it took so we spent the first 4 months, larger scale, and then again, once we locked it down to marketing and CX specific use cases, 4 months for delivery and production, and we launched 2 use cases around the same time in parallel.
Got it. Got it. And as you did this, and I can see Prabal has pasted a question in chat as well. Just talk through some of the customer data privacy constraints that you probably had to deal with, and how did you sort of think about it, and what were some success learnings there?
Yeah, so from a privacy perspective, we've got I'll call it a connected ecosystem for how we're picking up privacy from our different channels, from the web, from email, ultimately who's calling in from the contact center. All of that's centralized in our case, and so we were able to apply those privacy rules coming in from the customers, and preference coming in from the customers, take that from a downstream source and ultimately pipe it into the CDP as specific attributes. So do not email, do not call, honoring web opt-outs, even on our public site for California privacy and so on. So those are attributes that we're piping in the CDP from centralized sources.
Fantastic. I think thanks once again, Jason. I think it really was an amazing keynote, and I think you've set this up perfectly for the remaining 2 sessions in the morning. So really, really appreciate your time, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, happy to, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks, Jason. Great. So let's sort of keep the ball rolling. Let's move on to the next session where we'll have a fireside chat with David. David, can you join us for the call? Just I want to make sure that everything's okay on your side.
Everything should be here.
Yes.
Hi there.
Yes. Hey, hi, David. Welcome once again to the summit. Let me just get started with a quick introduction, although I'm not sure how many people in this call would actually need an introduction to you. But let me get this started anyway. So for folks in the audience who don't know David, David Raab is the founder and CEO of the Customer Data Platform Institute, a vendor-neutral organization with over 10,000 members. Which essentially educates marketers and technologists about customer data management. David has a long and storied history as an independent consultant, helping marketers understand, find, deploy MarTech and vendors. His client list includes Global 2000 firms in retail, financial services, telco, publishing, and many other industries. He holds a bachelor's degree from Columbia University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has written hundreds of articles and blog posts on marketing tech and regularly speaks and teaches at events around the world. Long introductions aside, David is the father of our industry, or as millennials today would call it, David, the OG of the CDP space. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Always good to see you, Subra.
David, let's just get started by talking about some of the trends between the last time we spoke in the last summit and now, and sort of what is same, what is different. Let's maybe talk about some of these trends. And I think, is it fair to say, to start off with, that in general, the demand for and the interest in CDPs have clearly gone up across all regions in the world? Are you seeing that as well? And if yes or if no, what sort of your take there?
Oh, we definitely see growth across the world. North America and Northern Europe kind of led the way, but we now are seeing much more growth in Southern Europe. APAC, again, different areas in APAC. Some were a little quicker than others to adapt it, but India, for example, very, very quick. But now really all across all of APAC, we see a definite rise in interest in CDP. And that's driven by digital transformation, by the pandemic, which made a lot of companies do more online and really forced them to accelerate changes that they kind of sort of knew they wanted to make, but they were moving along at relatively slow paces. And then this really just forced them to do those things. So there's been a very definite growth and interest in CDP.
And there was also this emerging trend of a couple of things. Let me start with one, which is that, we are actually seeing clients actually go through their second attempt at implementing CDPs, right? Or maybe they have tried it in some shape or form, either with one vendor and trying for another, or they tried it as a data lake and trying something else. So are you again seeing this, that in some parts of the world or with certain verticals, you're seeing this trend of a second attempt, and what are the learnings that these kind of customers seem to be having?
Well, there's definitely people who are out there buying their second or possibly in some cases their third CDP. We see this in the varying surveys. And we think in most cases, it's interesting because if you look at the data, on the one hand, they're out there looking for a new product. I think they're pretty satisfied with what they got from their original product. So it's not so much that the original product didn't work, it's that they needed more, they needed something different. So they got their feet wet, they understood what a CDP was going to be able to do for them. They got value out of that first system. They said, well, there are other things that we want to do. We want to use it in other departments. We want to bring in more data types, and we want some more functionality or some more connectivity. There are lots of specific reasons that a particular company might decide that it wants to go out and at least look for a different CDP. All those are happening. And, that's a good thing. It's a sign of maturity in the industry. Often it's a sign of growth in the use of the CDP within the organization. They got a CDP, say, for marketing purposes, and it did what it did. But now there are people outside of marketing who want to use it. They say, well, maybe there's a better system to support those other requirements.
So that sort of feeds into one of the things we spoke of as well, David, recently, which is that there also seems to be this trend where initially when sort of CDP started getting adopted, you had practically every department having its own CDPs. It was fairly commonplace for me to hear that, oh, I've got a bunch of CDPs in my company, depending on the function. But I think there is a shift to sort of a more centralized enterprise CDP, if you will, which, as you rightly said, is also accompanied by interest in IT departments wanting to build by some of these. So talk to us about this. How did this evolution happen? Why is it important for people to understand if they're still considering sort of multiple CDPs?
Well, the first thing you have to realize, and the reason I was laughing before, is, of course, people will say they have a CDP, whether they have what you or I would consider a CDP or not. Right? They say, oh, of course we have one of those. What is it again? But whatever it is, we have one, because nobody wants to admit that they don't. There was a great deal of confusion, and still, unfortunately, is a great deal of confusion about what a CDP is. Some people think a CDP is any system with customer data in it. In which case, yeah, they all have quite a few of those, right? Everybody has lots of systems with customer data. So that's part of the reason that we would get those answers early on, and we saw that again in all the data that we did as well. I think there is, if not a truly deep understanding of what a CDP is, which makes me sad because I spent the last 6 years of my life trying to educate people, but I guess I can't quit quite yet. But they at least understand what they need, and whether they got the label right or not. They really do understand the value of pulling all the data together in one place. They do understand the difficulty of pulling all the data in one place. And now, as you say, there are enterprise IT departments that before were willing to say, it's just a marketing tool, let the marketers do whatever they want. We don't really care as long as they don't pester us too much. Who are hearing that there are other groups in the company who have similar needs, or the other groups, as we said earlier, have seen what the marketers do and say, hey, that's great, I want to do that too. And the minute it gets beyond a single department, it becomes an enterprise concern. And then they jump in and they then have their own interests and priorities and opportunities and resources. Many of them do say, oh, we can build that. And that's been probably the most interesting development in the last year or so in the industry, is this much, much accelerated interest in companies building their own CDP equivalent. Now, by definition, at least by our definition, a CDP is packaged software. So by definition, you can't build it because you don't build packaged software unless you happen to be a software company. But setting that aside, and we don't want to be too pedantic, to build a system that has the functionality of a CDP is a lot of work. There was a very interesting announcement yesterday from one of the vendors, who's basically a reverse ETL vendor, who had added a profile building capability. And they already actually had a data ingestion capability. And those are the three big components of a CDP. And their press release was, oh, this will save months and months of work and all the stuff that you would have. Of course, these are the same people who, 6 months ago were saying, oh, well, you already have a data warehouse. Why should you buy a CDP? Because it's just so easy to tack a reverse ETL tool onto a data warehouse. And now that they have a tool that does the hard work, the identity resolution, the profile creation, all the other things, say, well, that's a lot of work to do that if you don't have a tool to do this. So there's this realization that it's not just taking a data warehouse, which is what a lot of the IT guys think kind of at first blush. There is actually a lot of very specific work that needs to be done to create a customer profile, which is the core thing that a CDP does. So in that regard, at least, there has been a little progress and a little better understanding in the world of what's really required.
And what would you tell, or let's say you have to arm genuine CDP enthusiasts who are trying to implement and not really look at it as a data warehouse. Let's say they're fighting with their IT firms on the IT department saying it's a data warehouse and we already have a CDP. If you were to arm these people with two or three things they can say, which will help them sort of manage all the key objections that generally come up, what would those be? Right. For example, one of the in the Mumbai summit we had Subhashish Ghosh from Kotak Life, who used this very telling phrase. He said, you know what, if you want to be close to the customer, a data lake is not going to work. You need a proper CDP. And that I thought was just a pithy way of putting things across. But if you had to like maybe give two or three things that inputs, what would those look like?
So our general attitude here, which is perhaps just a personal preference, is to be non-confrontational. Say, okay, Mr. IT department or Ms. IT department, you want to do this, just be sure you understand what you're getting into. There are specific things that a CDP has to do that a typical data warehouse does not do. Identity resolution is a primary one. Understanding how all the different identifiers and all the different systems can be combined to build a true unified customer profile, create an identity graph. Most data warehouses don't do that. Most IT departments have no clue how to do that. A little different in like financial services where you live, because the financial services guys have kind of had to do that for money laundering and anti-fraud and things like that. But when you get out of financial services, actually, it's pretty unusual for an IT department to really understand identity management. So that's one thing we say, look at that closely, really understand what you're getting into. The second thing that we want them to look at closely is real time. Yeah. Because most data warehouses don't do real time. They weren't built for it. There's really no reason. Data warehouses are built primarily as tools to support analysis. They're not, analysis, you pull out a data set and you work with your data set. There's really no need for real-time access. So most of the technologies, most of the database technologies that are used in data warehouses simply aren't built to support real-time. Those are the two big ones. And the other things that you worry about are connectors, both in terms of getting data in from source systems. Some of those will be feeding your warehouse. Some of them won't be. So how much additional work will it be to add in the sources that you really care about? And these are non-trivial connectors because you really have to get the data in just quite so. And on the other end as well, the connectors to the activation systems, either the analytical systems that are doing your modeling or the delivery systems that are delivering your messages. Well, how many of those is your warehouse connected to? And the answer is probably zero. And what's it going to take to build those connections? And again, you can't just say, oh, reverse ETL will do that. Reverse ETL is a batch technology. Doesn't do real time. Not what reverse ETL does. So it's not. These are not. Those are the things that they need to look at very carefully. And hopefully, if they're honest with themselves, they come to the conclusion, wow, this is really a lot of work. If I can buy a system, a packaged system like a CDP that does all this for me, that's probably a good choice, even though it might mean replicating some data, because that's the big thing that concerns the IT department. Say, hey, we have this data in the warehouse. We really don't want to make a copy of it. It's just sort of bad, sort of on a global sense, to make a copy of data. There are synchronization issues, there are security issues, there are lots of valid reasons to minimize the amount of copying that you do. But minimizing the amount of copying and flat out refusing to do copying are different things. There are some situations, and the CDP is one of them, where you do want to do the copying despite the disadvantage. It's simply worth paying that price to get the value that you're going to get. So that's the thought process that we try to lead IT departments through to kind of come to their own conclusion. Because if we just say it, they probably won't believe us.
Yep. Stay away from conflict for sure. There is also this trend of CDPs wanting to access sort of external data without actually importing it, right? And one use case, at least that I saw, was where two non-competing enterprises wanted to share some data sets with each other, but just sort of look at what the other has and maybe use it in some aggregated form to sort of create value for themselves. I don't know if there are other use cases, but would be interesting to hear from you about this particular trend. Why did it emerge, and what are some of the use cases that you're seeing?
Yeah, this is a very interesting trend and definitely a very substantial one. Part of it comes back to that IT department discussion that we just had, where again, we don't want to replicate all the data. So the CDP vendors, well, okay, that's fair enough. You don't have to replicate all the data. If you want a tool that will let you access the data that's in place in existing systems, we can add that kind of connection into the CDP. It's not trivial. I mean, the vendors who have done it, the CDP vendors who have done it, are kind of very proud of themselves, which always makes you assume that there was a fair amount of work involved. And it's not something you can assume every CDP can do, but it does reduce the amount of data copying, which is a benefit. What it also does is it gives you access to data that you would never in a million years want to copy. Either there's too much of it, so call detail records in telco. There are a lot of call detail records in telco. And replicating that volume of data is going to be very, very costly. Data that changes frequently, inventory levels. You're not going to import your inventory levels and update them in real time in the CDP because you only use them once in a while. Local weather conditions, which are very important for a lot of marketing. You're not going to constantly update the local weather conditions of all of your customers in every location. You're just going to go out when a customer comes in. You're going to look where they are and go out and find what the weather is in that particular location and just bring it in as you need it. So there are actually quite a number of use cases where having that external data access makes sense. Now, that happens to be a very standard capability, federated data access. The IT guys understand that one. It's been used for many reasons over the years. So it's not a technically new challenge, and it's not an unfamiliar concept, which is always nice if you don't have to explain it to people. But for the CDPs, which originally were all about building their own data, it's been a bit of an adjustment to say, okay, we don't have to bring it all in. We can find ways to give access to some of the external data on an as-needed basis.
Got it. Our friend Scott recently spoke about the rise of ops. I think he wrote a post about it some time back as well. Whether you look at data and data ops, revenue ops, you have product ops, design ops now. Essentially, the need to have highly specialized ops functions in marketing and revenue teams. In fact, in the keynote session we had before, Jason also spoke about the need to have train people and sort of have them in place. So invariably, when we speak of ops, there is also this question of how much of this is product versus how much of this is services. So the typical product versus services, where how much of it is something that the product/CDP should support, and how much of this is ops, right? So do you see this as something that is at odds with, or sort of in alignment with the overall CDP philosophy?
I have no problem at a philosophical level with there being ops people who manage the CDP. If you look at how CRM systems have been deployed, or any other kind of marketing automation systems, there's always going to be an ops person who's really the user expert. There's not a lot of value in training every marketer in your company to be an expert in the operation of any of those systems. You have admins who can do the more complicated things. You want to add a new data source. It really makes sense to have that handed off to a specialist who understands what's involved in that, because it's a fairly technical chore. You want to create a new connection to an external system. You want to add some new data elements, even though CDPs are very flexible when it comes to adding data elements. There's still some work involved. So yeah, any company of any size, you would expect to have specialists who are going to manage the operation of those systems. But as with marketing automation and CRM and the rest, there are other activities that you do want your business users or your end users to do for themselves. You don't want to have to go to an ops person to create a new segment. You should have a segment builder that lets the marketer not just create a segment, but kind of play around with it and see what's in the segments and try different versions of segmentation and do a lot of complicated things that are sort of stream of thought, where what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? You don't want to have to go to an ops person every time you have one of those little what happens if I do questions, because now instead of doing something in minutes, you're doing something in weeks, right? As you go back and forth. So there's a lot of self-service capabilities in a CDP, And that grows over time. The vendors keep adding new capabilities. But there are some things that are better done by ops people. Let ops be ops, and let marketers be marketers, and give the marketers as much control as they can reasonably take, but don't expect them to become ops people themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point you break. I think especially if you look at the sourcing of data itself as you try to bring it into the CDP, there needs to be somebody sitting there that's sort of trying to link the business objectives with the available data and figure out how to sort of massage it into the CDP. And I think there is definitely a sort of, and often, especially when you have enterprise CDPs, these data points tend to be spread across different department. So you really need that sort of layer, if you can call it that, of data ops to bring it into the CDP, I thought, right? So yeah, that's definitely so there are use cases for ops, but I think what you're saying is have enough self-serve so that the actual utility of the CDP is not impacted by people coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are things like data governance, privacy issues, where honestly you cannot let the marketers be unsupervised. They don't take those things very seriously. So you really do need the people who are a little more responsible to handle some of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a nice segue into I think any conversation that we have with you, or I'm sure that you have on any forum about CDPs, inevitably brings you to privacy. And also now I'm sure about generative AI and things like that, which we'll cover in just a bit. But how are you seeing the sort of privacy specifically as it relates to CDP evolve this year in the first, let's say, 6 months? And are there any major trend that you think people should be aware of as they're thinking through this?
Well, privacy is evolving very rapidly. We used to joke a couple of years ago that GDPR was the CDP Vendor Full Employment Act, because there was so much work to be done to get your company GDPR compliant. There was exactly the same work that was needed to implement a CDP. You had to go out and find where all your data was. You had to connect up all those systems. You had to keep track of how the data was being used. You had to govern what was done with the data to make sure it was compliant. And those are all the things that exactly a CDP does for you, or at least they are either required for a CDP or that a CDP actually can handle. I think more recently, what we've seen is a clear definition of where the CDP sits in all that and where other systems do. There are obviously privacy management systems. It's a huge and growing industry. So the data discovery and data classification generally sits outside the CDP, and the CDP vendors are okay with that. They don't really claim to do that. This is an area where I'm sure we'll touch on AI later, but where AI plays a major role in just sort of looking at what's out there and figuring out where all that personal information is hiding because it's not necessarily labeled properly. On the other hand, the CDP really should be the one place where people access customer data. And that means that the CDPs have to have a policy engine in place that governs that access and makes sure that people are doing things that they're permitted to do and not doing things that they're not permitted to do. And that depends not just on who they are, but more importantly on where the customer is, which regimes are in place, because different areas, and yes, even different states, in most countries, it's a national level policy, have different rules, and you have to enforce those. Once you're enforcing the access, now that gives you an obvious place to keep track of the usage of the data, the record of processing activity that's required. Again, the CDP is the obvious place to do that. Is the CDP the obvious place to capture consent? Maybe. Some CDP vendors have built the actual user interfaces to capture user consent and manage it, and to even accept access requests from people. And others say, no, there are other systems to do that. We don't really need to be experts in it. It's a little afield from the core CDP functionality of building and managing customer data. So we're beginning to see a little more clarity in what belongs inside the CDP and what doesn't belong inside the CDP. And of course, that's a good thing. The other side of that coin, of course, is the privacy rules keep changing. And you touched briefly earlier on sharing data with other companies in the context of external data access. And of course, that brings you to the data clean room world, which is where most of that sharing takes place in a privacy safe fashion. And again, there's a little bit of question as to whether that belongs in the CDP or not. You could make the argument both ways. There are certainly specialist data clean room vendors, and it is a different technology. So probably it is something that doesn't necessarily belong in the CDP in the long run, but you could make the case that it does. So, there are still some areas to be worked out.
I think that point about whether the CDP collects consent or not is a relevant one. Just, I think earlier in the week, I was talking to a leading UK retailer, and they were actually pushing for sort of including consent collection as part of the sort of CDP RFP that they were discussing, right? And at least my argument to them was similar to yours in the sense that it makes sense for the CDP to be adjacent when to where the consent is being collected, and bring that and sort of make sure that downstream systems adhere to that, but not necessarily be the system that ultimately collects consent. Why do you think people are asking for this? Is it just convenience that, okay, you know what, let's just throw in one more functionality into the CDP so that my job becomes easy? Or is there some other logical sort of business need for the CDP to be also collecting consent?
Well, again, you can make the case that the CDP is the repository for that data, so the CDP should be collecting it directly. I think, honestly, people have a list of pain points, and we've seen this over the years in many IT projects. It's the classic scope creep problem. People say, "Oh, you have a new system. Well, I have this problem. Maybe that system can solve this problem for me," whether or not that really makes any sense. And of course, the people who are sponsoring the system want as much support as they can get. So, sure, we'll add that to the list. And then the list gets very long, and that's where you get into problems, projects that become unwieldy. So I think that's the major issue. It's like they see this, it's related to customer data, it's a problem they have. They don't have a solution in place. If they can get one solution that also does that, so much the better. It saves them some grief. But yeah, I think you and I are on the same page that CDPs by and large don't interface directly with customers. They don't have user interface, consumer interfaces. So now all of a sudden you're adding one. It's not really a core competency of the CDP vendor. And that whole management of how you interact with your customers in a context of privacy is very, very important. It's an increasingly critical issue for many customers to understand what you're doing with their data, to trust that you're managing it correctly, to have control. So you really need to do that in a very careful and customer-centric way. And that's a skill. And it's not that the CDP vendors couldn't hire people who do that or train up their people, but it's a new thing for them. And honestly, I think there are other people who do it better, and other people who are going to focus on giving the marketers or the customer support people, or whoever kind of owns that process, all the options to set up that customer trust center in a way that's really best for their company. And a CDP vendor, that's probably not going to be the thing that they are really most skilled at.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. Let's move to a topic that I think everybody sort of, when I ask folks what do they want to hear when they speak with you, I think this was by far the number one. And I'm sure you now in multiple forums get asked this every time, but we simply cannot not talk about generative AI and the immense progress that we've seen in just a matter of few months. So let's start with the first and most basic question. How should, and maybe this is not even CDP related, it's just maybe slightly broader, and I just ask this to you, is how should business leaders think about this development, this sort of really, really quick development in generative AI and LLMs? How should they wrap their head around this, and any framework that you can give for people?
Well, obviously this is something we think about quite a bit. Actually, last couple of days I've been very focused on it because I was preparing a keynote, and the truth of the matter is I came up with a headline that was a good sort of link bait headline. That was, AI is not the future of marketing. Excellent headline. I had no idea what the speech was going to be, but it was a good headline, right? So a good topic for the speech. And then I was chatting with the conference people, and well, all right, so I went out and asked GPT what's the outline for this speech with this headline? And it came back with not a bad outline, actually. It was kind of what I was thinking. And what it kind of said was, well, AI is great at some things, but AI doesn't understand human emotions, so you still need the human touch. And I looked and I said, well, okay, that was what I was thinking. But, that's very much conventional wisdom. And if I can get that out of ChatGPT, they don't need me to give that keynote. They can just let the computer. I'll give it a little AI voice to text thing or text to voice generator. We have those. We use them here, actually. And then I don't have to go to this conference, and it saves me a trip to London. But okay, I don't want to do that. I want to actually add more value. So what's the next level of thought beyond that kind of obvious conclusion? And that's what AI is going to do for you. It's going to give you a sort of common sense, conventional wisdom. This is what it found when it was searching the literature, because that's really all it does. So if you want to have that, then AI is great. If you want to have a, dare I say, mediocre marketing content, AI will do that for you. And sometimes mediocre is all you need. I mean, for things like journey path development, honestly, how creative is that stuff? The marketers will probably tell me it's very creative, so I shouldn't say this out loud. But by and large, people are just delighted to have one at all, right? Because they're hard enough to build without trying to be super creative about it. And anyhow, you're kind of trying to follow what your customers are doing, not blaze some new crazy journey that they're not interested in to begin with. So, there are things that AI is going to do really well. It's going to replace a lot of work, and AI will be creative. I think there's this kind of myth that AI won't be creative. Yeah, you can actually tell the AI to be creative. It'll scour the internet for clever things, and it'll say, oh, this was done over here, and now you can do something similar like that over there. It'll be, again, creative enough. But will it have truly unique thoughts? Will it pull things together in a viewpoint with a coherence that a human expert will do? No, and that's actually what my speech will be about. Is okay, AI is going to be good at some things. It's not going to be good at other things. It's not really going to be able to see the future. First of all, not that humans are very good at seeing the future, but AI is only going to look back at what's been done, not what hasn't been done. I'm actually looking at my notes that I put down last night. And AI is not going to give you better data. And AI is driven by data, right? So I was thinking again in the context of the speech, and I'm sorry that I'm probably talking longer than I should here, but it's obviously top of mind for me, is I said, well, okay, if everybody's going to have sort of this pretty high level of AI generated content now, and program design, and a lot of other things that AI is going to do a perfectly competent job to do, right? Because the average company is going to do an average job. And on average, right? Some companies better, some worse, but most companies, by definition, will be average, and AI will be at least as good as average. So what will differentiate companies actually is the quality of the data that you feed into the AI. So, and I'd say that obviously I, work in the customer data world, but even if I didn't, I would say that's really where companies are going to differentiate themselves. Because if you can feed better data into your AI, you will actually get better and more unique output from the AI. So that's one of the areas that companies really are going to have to focus on to take advantage, to thrive in an AI managed world. And I guess I have to stop here because I'm kind of going on a little bit too long. But but the other thing that'll be a differentiator is the customer experience, which is not going to be driven by AI at all. If you think about it, you think about commodity industries, airlines, and financial services for that matter. Products aren't that different, right? Why do I deal with one company versus another? It's better CX. They smile at me more. They have better agents. Their policies are a little more friendly. maybe I like the cook, whatever it is, it's actually not something AI is ever going to change, because that really is about that one-to-one personal live experience, or even if it's an automated experience, it's still not really an AI generated experience. It's very much about how the company deals with the customer directly. So there are going to be a couple of areas where that AI is not going to be able to by itself fix for you, and those are going to be the areas in an AI-driven world where companies are going to differentiate themselves. So I'm sorry for a long speech, but
no,
now you don't have to go to that conference in London.
Yeah, well, you had your dry run right there, but I mean, there's a lot of big and important sort of takeaways that you called out. Not least of which was one of the questions which I was going to ask you, which is how do you see the role of CDPs? And obviously, where AI is concerned, it's like you said, it's all about data. If you get that right, and the quality of the data that goes in does make a difference. So you did answer that question of mine. But I think the other question that invariably gets asked, and especially in a crowded, cluttered sort of CDP space that we are sort of used to seeing now, is the role of the CDP and how close it should be to the AI itself. Is it an enabler in the sense that it just provides the data required, or do you see CDP providers sort of offering certain tightly integrated AI capabilities, and the pros and cons of each?
Oh yeah, no, AI has a huge role to play in CDP. I think we talk a lot about content generation, but AI has a very major role in data analysis, in understanding the data that's there, making the analysts work easier, coming up with insights. Again, AI will find very good insights in your data, things that you would not have noticed yourself. It's really good at pattern recognition. It's one of the things that AI does. And AI also, this gets a little less attention, although we're seeing it more now, can help with the mechanics. We talked earlier about analyzing data sources to understand the content of data sources. So when you want to integrate a new data source, rather than having a human analyst look at the data and understand it and model it, and which is the way it works now. And human analysts are good at what they do, but there are not that many of them, and they're expensive and they're relatively slow compared to AI. So the AI should be able to automate that process, or at least be an assistant. You don't want to let the AI totally automate it, but the AI should be able to speed that process substantially by surfacing things that an analyst needs to look at and understand. So I think those are all areas, and Denny resolution is another one where AI will have a huge impact. So those are all areas where the AI will work within the CDP to make the CDP a much more powerful, efficient, cost-effective tool than it would be without AI. So there's lots and lots of work to be done by the CDP vendors to take advantage of all those things.
I think I would love to keep grilling you on this, and I'm sure I can see you're also excited to answer many of these questions. But of course, maybe in fact, it would actually not be a bad idea for us to connect and sort of do one more session only on generative AI plus CDPs. Maybe I'll reach out to you for that separately. But for today's summit, David, thank you so much for joining us. It's super insightful as always to hear from you. I think we are just on time here, but if someone has a quick question, I can throw it in. Otherwise, I will sort of close this session with David. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, David, thanks a lot. Really, really appreciate your time this morning. And yeah, as I said, I will connect with you offline. I think you're going to be here in this part of the world soon, so we'll find a way to connect. Yeah,
we'll find a way. Okay, very good. Well, my pleasure. Thanks. Have a great conference. Take care.
Thank you. Great. So I will now hand the thread over to Declan for our panel session. Hey,
great
Declan.
session. Great session, Super. That was amazing. Actually, both Jason and David's have been fantastic. Very deep dive into CDPs and the benefits of. So wonderful stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm just handing it over to you to sort of introduce Randy and Kareem and go through the panel. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. So welcome, everybody. We've got a great panel ahead of us. And I'm hoping there we have Kareem and Randy, you coming on board? Excellent. There we have everybody. Okay, so let me welcome our esteemed guests, and also let me introduce them to everybody. So we have today Randy Saltzman, who is the Director of Brand Marketing at ABNB Federal Credit Union. Randy is an experienced leader of marketing and business development, sales, and media PR in both the corporate world and the nonprofit setting. He has over 20 years of experience in the advertising agency business side of the world as an account supervisor, coupled with over 20 years of senior management roles leading internal marketing teams at several credit unions. Randy has helped those organizations develop, execute marketing and business strategies that have consistently achieved or exceeded ROI goals for those organizations. Welcome, Randy. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me today.
Fantastic. And we have Kareem Masri, who is the head of digital data solutions at Y-Brands, a global consulting company. Kareem is a seasoned marketer in digital media with over 10 years experience in spearheading digital transformation and delivering results in marketing industry. His experience encompasses UX, UI, consultancy, tech stack solutions, along with a strong background in both ad tech and martech solutions. His extensive experience with key clients in a variety of industries like automotive, e-commerce, financial services, with clients such as GM, Ford, Amazon, IKEA, amongst others. Welcome, Kareem. How are you? You're mute.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah,
there we
yeah.
go.
Great. Thank you for
Fantastic.
having
Well,
me.
great to have you. Great to have you both here today. And I'd like to we've had great panels that have been very specific on what CDPs bring to the world, but I want to jump in the deep end of a broader question. So in a world where systems are gathering information faster than we can perhaps derive any meaningful insight from them, what advice would you have for the average CMO on how to use this enormous amount of data that's available to them to drive successful marketing outcomes? We can start with Randy. Let's start with you.
So I guess it's not the volume of data, it's how you want to use it. It is what's important to you to know, whether it's your audience, the consumer. It can be overwhelming, and you have to hone in on what's important to you. It has to be all about target audiences, demographics, psychographics, generations, and where they fit in. So while there's all that data out there, it's still important at the end of the day to understand who you're trying to reach, how you're trying to reach them, what message that you're trying to reach them with, talking in their generational language. I mean, brands are all about voice and personality and what they mean to someone. And so talking to someone who is a millennial is very different than a baby boomer. And so all of those pieces are important to putting together how you can focus on the audience that you need to reach, get them with a message that resonates with them, and get them to act. It's pretty simple.
Okay. Kareem, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. The key is on actionable data, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by a lot of volume of data available in the market, or even as well on the useful equally data that we're seeing. CMOs should always try to prioritize directly informed strategic goals. And CDP can as well help segmenting and analyzing the data effectively. And it's crucial for them to identify a foster data-driven culture in their organization. And like Andy mentioned, it's all about different demographics, psychology, and all of the data effectiveness. This is where it needs to be collected and have a decision-making process on it. So it's really important to identify what it needs to be done from the data, and personalization is key in here. Yeah.
Okay. And well, speaking of personalization, it's a really big topic on most people's agenda at the moment. How important is data in that equation, and what impact does technology help to bring to the table to drive this very personalized engagement that I think we're all striving to achieve? Kareem, start with you.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Andy.
Or Randy, whichever. Go ahead.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll start it off and you can kind of pile on if you would.
Yeah.
So again, we're talking about information overload these days. If you think about the amount of messages, whether it is marketing messages, email, texts, it's an overwhelming situation. I mean, life years ago was a little bit simpler. And so I think trying to cut through the clutter is so important. How do you get something across to someone who either has an affinity for your product and service, doesn't know about you, but should know about you? How can you have messaging that cuts through the clutter? And I think, again, it does start with data. As Karim said, it's so important to hone in on who you want to reach, how often you want to reach them, what are the messages that will speak their language and will resonate with them. And so, again, to me, it's really trying to take what is overload information and kind of boil it down into its essence so that you can reach someone on a one-to-one basis, talk their language, and get them to act. It's easier said than done, especially with all the information that's out there. But again, I stress that we are overloaded with information. We are overloaded with messaging, and how you can make your message stand out from the rest, that's the key.
Yes.
Karim, you want to answer that?
Yeah, it is very important on personalization, especially now as marketeers, they always strive to get in different regions on what the platforms they want to advertise on how to communicate with their audiences. But eventually, each platform has its own personalization and its own content, and it's really important for the marketeers themselves to identify what are the communication and how the personalization is going to happen. And without having the data, you'll not be able to do so. So without it, we cannot understand the customer needs, preferences, behaviors, technology, particularly when we talked about previously on AI and machine learning and how it plays a crucial role in processing this data, is delivering a personalized experience at scale, because you will be able to identify capturing all the data from different sources, and it will allow you to understand who is your target audiences and what the right communication messages that we need to drive it. It's not about the message as well, it's about the creative. So it combines different worlds from creative to content with technology, where it gives you the ultimate real-time tailored interaction, and which will allow us to have like the ultimate experience for the user, where this is can be happen across using CDPs and different integration with CDPs.
Okay, so we talked about data. We're talking about technology. We're talking about volume of data, and there was a recent study that said that marketers don't see the volume data as the big challenge. So what they see as the major challenge is the accuracy of the data that they're getting and the quality of that data. And how does something like a CDP help you sort of to pick through your data, figure out what the key data is, what the right data is to bring in? Or is there other technologies that you would say are out there doing that besides a CDP?
Karim, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah.
Thank you, Randy. So absolutely, the quality of the data is really important. Inaccurate or outdated data can lead to misguided strategies and wasted resources, right? And it's essential to have robust data management practices in place, whether be it including regular cleaning data and validating it, and it all happens when you have the right implementation on CDP, right? With CDP, you will be able to aggregate all the data that you have and have the ultimate view that you want to reach out to. Because I'll give you an example, all the marketeers and even the startup companies that they're doing, whether be it an e-commerce or a website or any different type of owned media. The problem is they only use 8%, and to be honest, it's less than 8% in these kind of data. I'll take an example on Google Analytics. There's a lot of resources that you can data that you can come up with, but you're not using it. You're not able to take the analysis and insights from it, right? So with CDP, you'll be able to aggregate all the profiling. You'll be able to understand the user behavior, and based on that, you can create different segmentation. and understand whether the user is navigating through your e-commerce website, what is the events that they're trying to do on your website, and this is where you can understand more on the perspective of the user. How many times he navigate through a certain page or certain activation page. This is where you'll be able to understand more. And CDP is really provide you with accurate and up to date, and it's up to ready to analysis. And this is where you can activate directly, whether be it on the owned media or whether be it on the paid media as well.
Okay, Randy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, piggybacking on that, still, it's all about your strategy, what your tactics are, how you can cut through, how you can make messages that you have an affinity with audiences. For example, in our case, they are our members. In some cases, we reach outside our membership to try to attract new members, new customers, if you will. That's very different messaging because they don't know us. They don't know our brand. They don't know what we stand for. And so we use a lot of different data sources that we rely on based on their expertise, some that are great at segmentation, some that are great at demographic breakouts and geographic breakouts, because there is a certain territory that we operate in, but we're expanding our territories all the time so more people can be a part of the credit union. But we try to find people that are experts in their areas of data and experts in their field. We may get into this a little bit later, but data analytics used to be housed inside the marketing team here at the credit union. We have taken that and kind of made it its own separate department because it relates to anyone and everyone within the departments that house the credit union. It's not just a marketing decision, it's everyone's information that they can pull from. So again, we try to find people that are expert in that area. We try to blend all of the data, all of the information, all the segmentation, all the targeted information, and boil it down to what's the campaign, what's the message, who's the target audience, how will we reach them, how often, and then we track their activity, to your point. How will we find out if they are going to, either our website or other places? How long are they spending on the pages? How are they reacting once they get to those pages? So again, we just try to surround ourselves with experts in the field, and we have some in-house people that can help us sift through that.
So speaking to that, in like credit unions and banks, and in particular financial services, but lots of companies are they're sort of business line driven, right? So you have different siloed interests within an organization. Each has their objective. Each wants to, has to hit their number, has to hit their, bringing in X amount of customers who are taking that product. How does marketing manage that sort of ecosystem? Because what I think the previous conversations were about is getting to a real true 360 real-time view of your customer, right? And if you have a whole bunch of siloed activity going on, how do you wrap your arms around that from a marketing standpoint? Because you're ultimately responsible for making sure there's marketing going for each one of these different product lines that you're responsible for. And how does the problem of having data in different places and then technology help you to solve those issues? And Randy, why don't you start this time? If we'll keep it going back and forth.
Yeah. So again, great question. I think about our marketing department as an in-house ad agency. We have internal clients. We have business services whose target audiences are small businesses in a geographic area that we operate in. We have, a mortgage department that has a whole different set of circumstances and target audiences. We have relationship building that we do from a B2B. It's not just a business to consumer in a lot of cases for them connect with builders, connect with realtors and things. And so, each target audience has their own unique flavor and their own unique personality. But again, as an in-house ad agency, we try to create a creative brief. We ask them to answer questions about what's the goal, what's the target audience, what's the timeline, what are the key messages that you want to get across to this target audience. So we help frame and collaborate on how we actually create these campaigns so that they will, in fact, make a difference have that affinity to our particular mortgage team as opposed to other mortgage lenders or other business services areas. So the in-house agency approach, whether it's the creative approach, and we do have outside agencies that do produce materials, whether it's digital marketing, whether it's email marketing, Google Analytics and all the Google search features. So we treat each individual as an individual client, and their needs are different, their targets are different, and we try to do the campaigns and we try to measure them. If you can't track it, then don't do it.
Okay. Karim?
Yes, I totally agree. If you can't track it, don't do it. This is
It's a waste of money.
this is a waste of money, and this is actually one of my my major thing when I'm using working with clients. Like if you can't track, don't spend money and don't do anything because it's just waste of money. And like Randy mentioned, like I totally agree. Having a 360 view is really important, and understanding the objective from each inner departments, because it's really important for us to identify each department objective, given if we're working on a holistic company. And this will allow us to understand more on the behavior side of the users. And this will allow us as well to integrate all the data from all touch points. And this is whether be it offline or online, because it's really important, because different brands or different businesses, they have a store and they have an online store as well. So we need to understand how they navigate through different stores that we own, and how to be able to understand the customer service interaction, because this unification is really integral in our decision. And having such technology, and especially on the CDP part, this will allow you to understand all of the different touch points, how to understand each user understanding, and having those analysis being mapped out to our objective. So yeah.
So,
And I would add one more thing, if
Go
I
ahead.
could, Declan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kareem. So, a lot of things that we do are A/B tests, where we'll do, target audiences, but we'll do different messaging or different creative, for example, maybe use different channels to compare the success of a campaign one to another. And that really gives us more insight into, all right, what might have resonated more? Did the creative just not cut through? Did it not make sense to the member or to the customer? And so, doing A/B testing at the same time and then comparing the results of those two tests help us refine it. And it's never 100% correct. It's not always going to work. Maybe both the tests fail, but invariably we'll find that one resonates and has a better response rate than another.
If you aren't failing, you're not trying. You're not doing enough.
Yeah,
So,
especially nothing is set in stone.
Yeah.
There's always room for improvements.
So within that ecosystem where you're working with each department and you're acting as an ad agency, how do you keep your hands around the most important thing? I think on Jason's one of his slides, it said 80% of companies that excel in CX outperform the competitors in revenue growth, and that's a Forrester quote. So how do you, because even though you've got all these different business lines, and in particular in the case of a bank or a member, whereas your customer base, they're the individual customer, so they can't be getting all these messages from all these people without you having your hands wrapped around that, so that you're ensuring that the customer's experience is not like they have 6 companies coming from the one company advertising. How do you manage, and can a CDP help you manage that process in a more CX friendly way?
Kareem, why don't you take that?
Yeah. It's I've been in both worlds, in IT and and marketing, and now what I'm driving is the businesses is to understand that CX is really important, because usually marketeers, they always focus on the paid and owned media and specific, but they don't drive it in the right way. We need to take into consideration the user experience from the day the user exposed to your brand till to the end touch point. You need to understand all of these variables and have mapped out each one of them, because a new customer is not like as a loyalty customer. You need to treat them separately. You need to have their experience separately. You need to understand the demographic of that user. And the next time he come visits your store or your online store, you need to have a more dynamic experience tailored to his needs. And this is something that CDP can really help, because with the more audience segmentation and and identification of the user, you'll be able to map out the user journey for you, and having as well as a DXP part of your implementation, which falls under the CDP as well. This is where you'll be able to implement a seamless experience for the user, and understanding more on their needs, whether be it on like I mentioned, online store or different stores. And it's really important. And this is where you can adjust different objective from the user touch points, right? So if I want to try to have a new user acquisition, that objective is different than having a user to submit the form or to apply for an application or do any certain acquisition event. So this is where you'll be able to identify all those different touch points, and you'll be able to map out a decision tree. Like with the decision tree, and especially with Lemnisk, they have it. They have it as a very nice decision tree on user acquisition, where you can map out if a user is a new user, how to map out the user journey and the content, and having drive all the necessary content and necessary actions that we want the user to perform.
Mhm.
So I think one of the things, building on what you just said, we like to get feedback from our members. Okay, we like to ask them, if we're serving them well, the things that they do like, they don't like, because if we don't have feedback from the people that have a relationship with us already, understand what they like, what they don't like, how they like to be served messaging. So I think the feedback is a huge missing component. If you're not asking those kinds of questions, whether it's, again, the user experience, how we're delivering various channels of messaging, whether it's email or whether it's other vehicles, I think that you're missing the boat. Getting their input. We see reviews, you see reviews. What are people saying that's good or bad? We can do all the marketing in the world, but if our member service is awful, we're not going to have a sustainable business. And so where are the holes? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How could we be doing things better? That will help us in the customer experience area, but also if there's a consensus of things that maybe we're doing right, great, we need to do more of that. If there are things that we're just kind of missing the mark on, they're not afraid to tell us, that's for sure.
Mhm. So one of the, and we David went into it, one of the big topics, sort of moving into sort of getting your hands around data, the big technology topics these days is AI with Chat GDP and etc. Where do you think, how are we adapting AI right now within marketing? And are there existing technologies that will help you apply AI more easily in today's world, such as a CDP? Karim, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, in the previous session, they mentioned a really key important note that without data, AI cannot perform anything, right? And data is key for an AI to start giving you insights and start mapping and program it the way you want to perform. And to be honest, it's really important for the business entity to have the digital maturity and to understand what are the touch points that you want to collect data, and how AI can come in and use this data to give you the ultimate insights and actionable insights for you to take on. And this is really important for the business entity to have the maturity level on what kind of tools and what kind of touch points of data and signals that you want to get and provide for the AI, in order for AI to give you more responsive decision and analysis on it. And it's really a thing that most of the companies now, they are struggling to understand that AI is booming. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. The AI is having a really hyped on, but it's not about the hype. It's all about understanding how to leverage the AI into the data and what kind of data you want to provide to it in order for you to take it and action it.
Can I just add before you jump in, Randy? Just ask a quick
Yeah.
question. So, I think everybody agrees the more data, the better for AI. So it lives and breathes in data. So for AI, would you agree with the hypothesis for AI to really work to its full benefit? You really do need a real-time 360 view of your customer. Like, sure, it could work in a silo and do a product-specific kind of analysis, but the ultimate goal would be to have it to give it the maximum view of your customer base, so that how it interacted with each one of your silos, how it interacted with every communication, how, and I think in Jason's response, he brought us through a woman who wanted a more personal touch, wanted all of that. But to get that, you have to bring a massive amount of data. You cannot live in a siloed world, and you need a piece of technology. Obviously, I would argue with CDP is the perfect technology. But would you agree that we have to get to that place to really get the benefits of AI? Randy?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Randy,
Or
sorry.
Karim, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, Randy, talk. I took my.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Randy.
Well, truth be told, I told Declan when he invited me to this that I am not a data head. I have not been a data head, although I rely on smart people that work with me and around me and under me. I'm just starting to really understand a little bit more about how AI works. I think there's always going to still be a personal touch. I think as marketers, we have insights that maybe a machine doesn't have. You can get all the data in the world. You can reach out to the right people. But again, if the message is wrong, or if the voice isn't correct, or it doesn't make sense to someone, or it isn't easy, I mean, I do a lot of writing for all the platforms that we're on. Each one is different. I'll write differently for a social media post than I'll do for a direct marketing campaign, that I'll do for a traditional media campaign. It's just come from experience. But as I said, all the data in the world is not going to just get results unless you have a human touch, the right message, something that makes sense to someone and causes them to act. I mean, we're a commodity product. We have the same product that every bank does, every other credit union does. How can we differentiate ourselves? And just data alone can help us hone in on our targets. However, that's from a branding standpoint, from an awareness standpoint, from an action standpoint. That's where we as humans, I think, really have to still infuse ourselves into the campaigns that we do to make it work the best that it can. It's just not something that you do in a vacuum.
Absolutely. Karim, you want to add to that?
Totally agree with Randy. And it's important in different region. There is different seasonalities, and AI doesn't understand, like in the MENA region or in the APAC or there's seasonalities where the data changes, where the user behavior change, and some of them there is like force majeure things that we are not capable of, such as COVID. We weren't anticipating that having COVID, for example. These are things that AI cannot capture or cannot take an action based on human interaction and understanding, and even as well on leveraging the market experience. It's really important to identify all of these measures and how to take those data and plug it to the AI, especially when they mention ChatGPT and how he can drive different headlines and description. But talking to user, it's like having a face-to-face interaction with him. I need to convince Randy to buy my product. I need to understand who is Randy, what his capability, what he wants, where he lives, what his interest. All of these action points that I'm understanding about Randy, for example, the AI cannot, maybe can give you a very broad message which he might like and he might not like. But me as a human interaction with him and talking with him and having the sense of communication on its tone of voice, this is where you can map it. So AI can provide can tick the boxes for you on being proactive, but there's always a place for us as a human to come in and change it and make it more perfectly done for our business marketeers. Yeah.
Sure.
So I would also
go ahead,
add,
Randy.
yeah, sorry about that. So
No worries.
I have kids who are in their 20s and 30s. I use them as my little guinea pigs because they're very different than than me. They rely on reviews, they rely on referrals, they rely on their friends. If they had good experiences, so that's not AI. That's a personal interaction. That's a one-on-one. My daughter will do research. She'll look up the reviews. She'll talk to people that might have done things with this company or with this product. So we can send all the messaging in the world, but if someone doesn't convince her that they've had a good experience or convince her that, it was of value to them or it had, the things that they needed, it blows up. It's a waste of time and waste of money if there are negative things out in the marketplace. And so reputation management is really important, making sure that you understand what people are saying and how they feel about you and your brand. So again, a machine isn't going to tell you that, but my kids will do more research than I ever would, and then they'll make the decision. So I didn't want to leave that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great point. And I agree with you both. I mean, as it exists today, AI seems to give us the ability to really, at scale, define audiences, right? Down to so you can actually deliver a very, a group that says this is the kind of messaging you should do there. But ultimately, it's up to the humans to design that message. And AI does not live in the physical world. So it's when somebody calls your call center or somebody walks into a branch or somebody walks into a store, that's something that's out of control. That's where, the brand and the brand experience. So the human part has not been removed. Individual, brands, marketing is sort of the ambassador between the brand and the member or the customer. And so with the demand is always to get better performance out of the data or get better performance out of the money being spent on marketing dollars. How do we, does the organizations change? I mean, is there a change in midsize and enterprise in the type of people that are needed with marketing to understand what's coming out of, like data engineers, data scientists, analysts? Are they all key parts of the equation? And then will AI go around and change that in 4 or 5 months or in a year or whatever and take all of that out? So is marketing going through, is that necessary? Do you need data engineers? Do you need data analysts? Do you need data scientists? Depending on obviously the size of the organization. Randy, you want to start?
Well, all of the above. We talk about information overload, but unless you have experts who can sift through that and can really give you, their best thinking, their best recommendations. Again, as marketers, the data is great. It'll help us hone messages, both the language and both the targets. However, typically marketers haven't been great data people. And as I said, I raise my hand and say, that wasn't my background. It's not my area of expertise, but I surround myself with really smart people who can say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish with the campaign? Who are you trying to reach? What kinds of products and services, if that's the kind of campaign that you're running, and what's your desired outcome? And so if you don't ask the right questions, if you don't give them the right input, you're going to get bad output. And so I think given that, having those experts surround us and understand the rationale for what we're doing, understand what we expect to happen, understand how the return, how we track things, absolutely essential. And a small organization as we are, we don't have all of those resources. And as I mentioned, we do rely on some outside expertise, but all of the above is really the easy answer. And then just having us intelligently sift through that, collaborate on it, and make sure that if we're doing A/B testing, if we're doing, campaigns that are either first time out or repeat campaigns, that we keep it fresh, we keep it relevant, and we make sure that if someone hasn't bought a product, maybe what's their propensity for the next product? What is the profile that will allow us, if we're not selling X product, what might else they be interested in? So I think that's a huge part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, back in the 2020, I wrote an article on Campaign Middle East about the trifecta. The trifecta is having the marketeers with the data scientist and the IT to work closely with each other, because this is really important as us as a marketeer, or at any type of integrations or any type of action that we're trying to do, because data is huge data, like we mentioned earlier, and we're only using less than half of it, right? And having someone that can able to take this data and harmonize it for us, and try and give us the absolute value of it that we want to take action on it. This is really important. And a lot of tools in the market are being used, but having a CDP where cannot do all the work for you, but at least can take the action point from all the different data sources that you have, and harmonize it in a way that is can be readable for the marketeers and understand and action it based on that. And this is example of when a marketeers work in solo, they fail miserably because they're not able to grasp everything that's happening in the market, whether be it on technological advance that's happening, or whether be it on the IT infrastructure, because we all know sometimes IT, they always, block things when it comes to technologies. You can bring this technology in, it will interfere with our security and all of that, data breaches. So it always create a conflict. And given that I've been in both worlds, I can understand the frustration behind it. And yeah, CDP, to be really honest, it can tick that box, and it can facilitate everything that's trying the marketeer to achieve, whether be it on the owned media as their own channels, or whether be it on the paid media as well.
Okay. Well, unbelievably, we've actually come to the end of the session. I can't believe that time flew by that fast, but I guess it's all the great content you guys have given us. But before I go, a quick message: is there anything that you guys, any prediction you see in the next 12 months that you want to leave us with, Randy, or both of you, if you have anything, or you let me know where you see trend in the marketplace, either very specific to maybe credit unions, or in a broader sense, Karim, on your end.
So I'm going to take it out of my business. I mean, I've been in the workforce for over 40 years. I think that the pace of business has changed. The instant reaction is what is expected now. I think that we've really been far more intelligent about refining our audiences, targeting our audiences. I think that AI is going to be there, is going to continue to expand. I think that there are things that we don't even know about yet that are about to happen. I think that some of the things that are coming up with AI and how scary people, scared of AI they are about taking over the world. When I was growing up, we had 3 TV channels and a dial phone. And so my kids don't know that. They've never seen that. They kind of laugh at me. And so I just think the pace of technology advancement is so accelerated now, and it's going faster and faster and faster, and trying to keep up with it is almost impossible. So again, going back to the experts, going back to people that are deeply involved and deeply understand not only trends, but what's in the future, that's essential. And they need to provide that to us, because I just don't have the capacity to either understand it or know what's the next great thing.
Karen, you want to finish us off there?
I cannot agree more than Randy. It's really scary how the pace of technology and CX, customer experience, is going to be a key, and communication and being personalization is gonna be a key part, especially on the marketing side, because now the users are being more knowledgeable on the AI. So whether an experienced user or regular user or any other users are trying to see the content, they will be able to differentiate whether this content is being mapped out by an AI or is being mapped out by a human interaction that makes more tone of voice and sentiments into it, right? And this is where users will be able to identify the brand relation and the communication type. And having a CDP on top of a DXP will be growing really fast, and a lot of brands, they will have to adapt to it. And digital maturity, as always, I always talk about digital maturity because it's really important for the entity itself to before going out to the public, they should be able to have in-house digital maturity knowledge and understanding. And if all the departments are on the same page on the digital infrastructure they are going to perform, this is where anything that will be performed by this department will be having a big exposure on it.
Karim, thank you. And obviously, I couldn't agree more. And I think it was Jason who said it. Foundational enabler. That's what a CDP is. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's a good note. But Randy, Karim, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Your insights were fantastic. And I'm going to hand it back over to Supra.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim, Randy, Declan, for a super insightful discussion. With that, we come to the end of the summit this morning. I hope you all took away something useful as you either embark on or sort of continue your CDP journey. I certainly did. And if I had to leave you with my quick 3 pithy takeaways from the 3 sessions, they were, from Jason's keynote, progress over perfection. Make sure that you're continuously sort of moving towards launch and ROI. From the fireside chat with David, AI is not the future of marketing, controversial as it may seem, but that is obviously getting borne out by the rest of the conversations that you heard from Jason and the panel. And finally, from the panel session with Randy and Karim, if you can't track it, don't do it. Thank you all for joining. The recording of the summit will be shared via email. Have a good rest of the day, evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you once again.